Africa Prime, brought to you by Jamison's Select Reserve.
Welcome. This is Africa Prime. I'm Godfrey Mutizwa. In tonight's edition, we're talking to Ruth Kagia. She is Country Director for South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland, Madagascar, and Mauritius. I have to edit that she used to be Country Director for the World Bank for 7 African countries. That has now been reduced to 5 African countries. And those 5 African countries, if I can give it to them, are Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, South Africa, and Swaziland. Ruth, did I describe it right?
You did.
I did. I got it right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you have been with the World Bank since 1990. Now, that's a long time in life. And within that time frame, you have been helping Africa deal with some of its most pressing challenges. But at the moment, the biggest challenge facing Africa is, of course, the European debt crisis and the impact that it's likely to have on its economies. From a World Bank perspective, sitting in Southern Africa, what kind of an impact have you seen so far in terms of the programs that are run by the World Bank in our region?
Thank you, Godfrey. The European crisis is still a work in progress. It is still playing its way through Europe and through the continent. We are all concerned that if it is not contained, the ripple effect is going to be felt quite severely, particularly in the Southern African countries that are very globally connected, where for several of them, South Africa in particular, Mauritius, another example, nearly 2/3 of their trade is with the Eurozone. We have already seen a reduction in demand, particularly in textiles in Mauritius and Lesotho. And the concern is that as the Eurozone contracts and the consumption patterns begin to change, almost invariably, that's going to affect what's happening in our countries. Yeah. In 2009, with the global financial crisis, one of the most frightening consequences, and that was quick and immediate, was Botswana, right, where the demand for diamonds plummeted almost overnight.
It just collapsed.
And we were all watching nervously, saying, what happened to this country that has been such a stellar performer, yeah, and now it is threatened to the core. So it is the main impact that we're concerned about is a reduction in demand, right, for the commodities that come from the continent, whether it's mineral resources, as in the case of Botswana, yeah, whether it is manufactured goods, as in the case of textiles, yeah, or whether it's just investments. Right.
So what can the World Bank do in an instance such as that? We know that, of course, the national governments themselves, it's their primary responsibility to try to make sure that they mitigate the impact of the crisis. But yes, from a World Bank perspective, when you see things like you're describing in Botswana, what can you do? And then what are you doing now to help Africans cope with the impact of the crisis?
2 things. The first is to monitor the impact, the short-term impact, yeah, on the poor, where the safety net very quickly collapses. Right. So making sure that if textile workers are being laid off, that they do not lose their means of livelihood. Sure. So we have, in the case of Lesotho, looked at a social safety net to make sure that the poorest people who are hit most, right, by that impact.
So you help the Lesotho government find means as well as resources to try and help those people.
Exactly. But where I think we add most value, yeah, is supporting the governments begin to shift the structure of their economies so that the vulnerability, yeah, that is built on the heavy dependence in one set of countries, in this case the Eurozone, yeah, is reduced. So in the case of Botswana, we are working with the government to begin to diversify their economy.
Is it easy? Because now you're coming into the realm of nationalistic tendencies and beliefs and stuff. Is it easy to come to them and say to them, tell you what you are facing is no ordinary fit. What you require is X and X and X.
It is easy when you meet a country at its point of need.
Right.
So if you go to Botswana and say, this is a glimpse of the future where there is going to be much greater volatility, and where this is the time for Botswana to begin to diversify its economy so that it is not fully dependent on a single commodity.
Do they always listen, though?
Well, the beauty is we are working with some of the best countries in the continent. They are sensible governments. They are way ahead of us. So we are not telling them what to do. We are supporting them do what they are already starting to do. So in the case of Botswana, we have a fairly advanced engagement right now that started during the 2009 crisis to diversify away from diamonds, so that in the event that there's a repeat of such a crisis, the economy does not collapse.
But unfortunately in our region we also have, of course, and one of the countries that you look after is Swaziland. And as we know, Swaziland, if I may use the word politely, is a basket case. And one wonders, are they listening to you? Are you talking to them?
Let me correct you actually, Godfrey. Swaziland is not a basket case.
It is not.
Swaziland, you've got to separate issues of governance from issues of the country and of the people.
Sure.
You've got a very sensible set of leaders that are lying awake at night worrying about the future of that country.
Sure.
And those are the ones that we work with as our key counterparts. Our role becomes one of holding the mirror in front of the country and saying, if you don't focus on the following issues, there may be a crisis that is impossible to contain. And there may be one or two individuals in leadership. No, it's not our role. We try to keep away from the politics, because our support from the bank is most effective when we remain an honest broker, when we refuse to engage in the political dynamics, but basically look at the long term and the impact of actions that are not necessarily supportive of a macroeconomic stability, that are not supportive of good governance. So Swaziland, as far as I'm concerned, is in a delicate situation right now, but it is not a basket case.
It is not a basket case.
It's not a basket case.
Now, are there some that have refused to listen to you, where you have actually come to them and said, tell you what, here is the mirror, here is what you look like, here is what you will look like if you don't do X and X?
You see, if I may respond, not just as somebody who works at the World Bank, but as an African who worked for even a longer period with my own government, and I try to put myself in the shoes of my counterparts in government who are on the other side. World Bank advice and support is most helpful when it is responding to felt demand.
From the government itself?
From the government itself, from the country itself. The country in this case, because that includes civil society as well. So when you respond to demand, when you meet a country where it is hurting, then it doesn't matter where the advice is coming from. Our advice falls on deaf ears when we think we know. When we come with
we went through those problems in the late 80s
exactly.
into the 90s.
And look at where it led us. In some ways, the continent ended up being much worse off by advice that was well-intentioned but misaligned with both the reality but also the political economy. So if there are some democratic concerns in Swaziland, there are many other partners, including SACU, including SADC, that can address those much more effectively. So working in concert with them, we do what we are paid to do, if you like, which is to support the vulnerable, to support economic stability, and to provide bridging funding when and if it's required.
I was going to ask you if in the time that you've been working in the sub-region, whether you have had examples of governments that have turned your way with your advice. when you think back over the whole period that you have been with us here?
With you here in South Africa? Or
In the sub-region, in
Southern
Africa.
In the World Bank?
In Southern Africa, in the World Bank, from a World Bank perspective, from your experience.
Not turned away in as direct a manner.
It's done diplomatically.
It's done diplomatically. But also,
sure.
Sometimes when I have felt that there's much more we could offer, there's much more value in what we are offering than is being acknowledged. But I've been very pragmatic about that.
Sure.
This is a set of countries that witnessed some actions with the World Bank in the 80s, early 90s, that made them wary. So when you come into an engagement where it's still very tentative, where is a relationship that is still very nascent, you don't push. You say, you try to use windows of opportunity as they arise.
You're speaking like a diplomat, and you're showing the school that you've got as a diplomat. Now, of course, the elephant in the room is Zimbabwe. I mean, Zimbabwe has come and gone to the end, if you like, and bounced back.
Yes.
Has the World Bank been with them all the way through?
I actually worked with Zimbabwe, and in the 90s, I used to be the sector manager for human development in Eastern and Southern Africa. And I worked quite closely with the Zimbabwe government then. This was about 10 years after independence. The economy was booming. The country was doing very well. They had maintained the infrastructure.
We were there.
You know, Zimbabwe, as you recall, expanded its education system, secondary education system, 2,000% in 10 years. One of the fastest expansions in history. And we commended them for that. But we're also on record as having said there's dynamite here if you don't do something about the land issue. There are a lot of issues that were being glossed over that we tried to put on the table. And it wasn't always listened to. It's not a very nice position to be in to say, I told you so.
No. In fact, you never almost say so.
You don't say so, but it hurts me personally because I saw how robust that economy was in the first 10 years. Part of the reason why I'm confident Zimbabwe is going to rise again and much faster than countries emerging out of conflict is because they developed a very, very strong human resources base. And when all those people in Zimbabwe, from Zimbabwe who are in diaspora go back, that country is going to take us by storm because they invested in something that cannot be destroyed, which is the human capital. So they did a few things right, they did a few things wrong, and in the end, we work with what we have.
For sure.
Yes.
Well, let's see. It's a conversation that we'll have to continue.
Exactly.
Ruth Kagia is a country director for South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, as well as Swaziland. And we are discussing with you here what she has seen in Southern Africa in her time at the World Bank. When we come back after the break, we want to try to understand where she's come from, the kind of things that have influenced her, and how, as an educator, she ended up at the World Bank. Don't go away.